Guys, so today I wanted to talk about a topic that has been on my mind for a long time, and I honestly have been wanting to make this video for a couple years now, but every time I just end up stopping myself before I actually do it, so we're uploading this one. So the topic of today is going to be the climate change denial campaign, which a lot of people don't know existed, but was actually a really big thing, and probably one of the main roots of why people today think that, some people today think that climate change isn't real. Meanwhile, we do have 100% enough evidence to back it up to say that it is real. It is human caused. Climate is changing 100%. We have to stop denying that. But today I'm gonna tell you guys the story behind why there's such controversy, because this is ridiculous. Before I get into the story of climate change denial, I just wanted to share with you guys that I did a couple polls online to get a diverse kind of consensus from people. So I asked them, what is the most important problem when it comes to climate change? And I gave the two options of lack of education and not knowing how to help. And surprisingly, 72% of the people who answered my poll answered that it was a lack of education, which why I'm making this video. And then I also asked, why do you think people don't believe in climate change? And I gave the options of not enough science and money. And 82% of people said money, so again, why I'm making this video. So the 18% of people who believe that there's not enough science, I can direct you to the first question, that it is majority of lack of education that is keeping us from coming to a full consensus that climate change is real, human caused, and that we have to take action. And so now to begin the story of the climate change denial campaign. All right, so in the 1950s, what is now known as ExxonMobil did a study on CO2 in the atmosphere, and they concluded that there was a large amount of carbon dioxide, and it's probably from fossil fuels. So they didn't do much after that. They kind of just studied it and were like, okay, it's fossil fuels. And then so we skip over to the 1970s, and again, somebody from ExxonMobil wrote a paper called The Greenhouse Effect that basically talked about having to possibly change what they were doing because of the concentrations of CO2 in the atmosphere. So skip over till the end of the century, or not the end of the century, the end of the decade, and all of the major fossil fuel companies came together to kind of talk about this, and they were like, yeah, we're probably gonna be responsible for this in the future, but they're like, whatever. So they created this program that was kind of meant to cause doubt in the general public's view. So let me just pause this story for a moment. I don't know if you guys know about this, but back in pretty much during this time period, cigarettes were a really big thing. I've looked through a Time magazine from these years, and if you look almost on every other page, there's a whole bunch of different tobacco ads, cigarette ads, brands that I've never heard of before until I looked through it. So there was cigarettes were a really big thing back then, pretty much, and there was a lot of money in it. So when they started discovering the negative effects of cigarettes, like lung cancer and stuff, the companies knew that they were going to start losing a lot of money, because there's a lot of when it comes to health impacts, if people find out oh, this is going to give me lung cancer, they're less likely to do it because they know of the negative consequences. I don't know about you, but I know somebody who's died of lung cancer. I know a lot of people who also know people that have died of lung cancer. It was a very big deal because of how popular cigarettes were back then. So the companies basically took it upon themselves to start denying the claims from doctors that cigarettes were causing lung cancer. So they created all these fake internet wasn't big back then. They created all of these like fake organizations and fake like research, basically to say it's not happening, it's not real. We have this evidence that it's not causing it. And in their minds, they knew the truth is going to come out eventually. But while people think that it's not causing lung cancer, they're going to keep buying the product, they're going to keep consuming, keep getting addicted, and they'll be able to make a profit in the meantime. So they kind of kept this campaign going. Cigarettes aren't causing lung cancer, it's fine. And eventually, as they were expecting, they got caught, and they had to give an announcement that said, no, we were actually lying. Like, cigarettes do cause lung cancer. But in the process, they knew that none of them would face jail time. They wouldn't get harsh consequences. I believe they had to pay a fine, like just a really big fine, which at that point, since they had been making such a profit, it was like whatever. So now let me end that story and go back to the Climate Change Now campaign. So there's all these studies that have been done that say that the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere have been rising, probably in connection to the fossil fuels that they've been producing and taking out of the ground. And so the companies basically came together. ExxonMobil as a leader, because they had been the first ones to publish a paper and publish research that said that climate change was real. So they basically took it upon themselves to say, why don't we, like, look how well it worked for the tobacco companies, like, why don't we do some of that? And again, they knew that they weren't going to face like serious consequences. They were probably going to lose some credibility. They'd probably at the most have to pay fines, but they were willing to take the risk. So they hired some of the people that were part of this tobacco campaign, and they were like, hey, can you do the same for us? So that is how the Climate Change Denial campaign was born. These people were basically selling their credentials to oil and gas companies so that they would be able to switch the public opinion, so that people didn't think that climate change was human caused. And they made a whole bunch of websites, fake organizations, fake nonprofits with fake information that was basically taking like a little like small percentage of something that is causing climate to change and blowing it up to say that this is the reason. It's not because it's human caused, it's a natural occurrence. The point of their campaign was to cause doubt in the American public's eye. And this didn't come into light, like this whole campaign, like everything that they did not come to light until about 2015. So they have been publishing all of these fake articles with all this fake evidence. Like, they hired people who had gone to college, studied this, and basically bought their credentials so that they would make false claims, because if it's coming from somebody who has a legitimate background in this information, you would think to trust them. But not when they work for ExxonMobil. They're pretty much selling their souls to oil and gas. And this is why there's such a large division between what people think about climate change. Because again, this wasn't even discovered until 2015, which was at this point in time 3 years ago. So yes, this information has been out for 3 years, but like the stigmas and the way that people think, that takes a lot longer to change. So we're on that boat right now. We have politicians that have explicitly said that they don't believe in climate change, which here in the US, we are denying that climate change exists more than anywhere else in any other country. Like, how ridiculous is that? Like, do we as Americans, like, are we so arrogant to believe that something that is causing trouble in Spain, it's causing trouble in the islands, it's causing trouble in other places of the world. Are we so naive to believe that because it is not affecting me personally, it doesn't exist? Like, there's a reason that every other country in the world is involved in the Paris Climate Agreement and is looking for innovative solutions to these problems, while we're just sitting back saying that it's cold outside, it's snowing outside, it must, like, climate isn't warming. Like, no, that is so naive and idiotic. Get educated. Take a science class. If you learn enough science and if you learn the way that weather works, you will know why there's a 97% consensus within climate scientists that climate change is happening and is human caused. Like, do you really believe that you are more educated than 97% of climate scientists? Are you more educated than somebody who has their PhD or master's and has been studying this for like 5 to 10 years? No. Are you more educated than the doctor that tells you that you're sick, or the dentist that tells you that you have a cavity? No. You don't deny that you have a cavity. You don't say, no, I'm not sick, to a doctor when they tell you flat out that we ran your results, we ran your tests, we looked into your teeth, you have this. So why are we denying that climate change exists? And considering that in the US we emit more greenhouse gases per capita than anywhere else in the world, it's actually pretty important that we reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Because despite the fact that China is the world's biggest polluter, per capita they almost emit nothing. Like, I think the last number I saw was probably like 13 per capita, which for the US is like 26, 36, something around that, something ridiculously different.